My own daughter blocked me on her phone, and in that instant, I realized something. I had a button she couldn't block. Before I tell you this story, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because every time you comment and subscribe, you help prove that a parent's dignity can't be erased with a single click. It was late at night. The house was silent, broken only by the ticking of the kitchen clock. The TV flickered in the living room, but I wasn't watching. My eyes were glued to the phone screen. I searched for her name, Madison. I pressed call once, twice, 3 times, until the call dropped. I tried again. Nothing. This time the message was blunt. Call blocked. For a few seconds, I just sat there, frozen, like the floor had vanished beneath my feet. The phone felt heavy in my hand, as if it were made of lead. What echoed wasn't the sound of a dropped call, it was silence. A sharp, brutal silence that said more than 1,000 insults ever could. My daughter had erased me from her life the same way you swipe away an annoying notification. I, who had been her father, her provider, her safe place, was now nothing more than an unwanted number. First came the anger, hot pulsing. I almost hurled the phone against the wall. But then came something worse, emptiness. A cold, crushing hole in my chest that only someone rejected by the person they love most could ever understand. I closed my eyes and remembered the day she came running to me with scraped knees, asking me to fix her bike. Dad, only you know how. That little girl of 8 trusted me for everything. And now, at 23, she was blocking me like I was a stranger. I looked around. Her graduation photo on the wall seemed to mock me. Each golden letter on that frame was a reminder of everything I had sacrificed. Private school, trips, a car. I had carried every burden. And in the end, there wasn't even respect left. The lump in my throat tightened. But in that moment, an idea began to form. If she thought she could erase me from her life, maybe it was time to remind her that I could push a button too. She had blocked me on her phone, but she had forgotten. She couldn't block me from the bank. That night, after watching my name disappear from my daughter's phone screen, I sat in the living room for hours. It was close to midnight when I finally stood up. The house was drenched in silence, as if even the walls knew the Chihuahua walls knew the shame I had just felt. I lived in a quiet neighborhood in Atlanta. Tree-lined streets, well-kept houses, perfect lawns. From the outside, it looked picture-perfect, like something out of a magazine ad. But inside, my home had become a stage for silence, resentment, and distance. The brown leather couch still bore the imprint of the nights I'd slept there after fights with my ex-wife. Divorced for 5 years now, only one promise remained intact. Madison would never go without. She would have the life I never had. And in many ways, I kept that promise with almost military discipline. My name is David Walker. I'm 55 years old. I spent my whole life working as an accountant, one of those men who learn to deal with cold numbers just to hide their own pain. I was always meticulous. I kept every receipt, every penny, every detail of the accounts. My life was predictable. My clothes modest, my gestures reserved. But if there was one thing I never held back on, it was Madison. My daughter grew up surrounded by comfort. Private school, a car at 17, study abroad in Europe. Every one of her achievements was a trophy for me. I didn't care if I wore the same winter coat 3 years in a row, as long as she had the latest dress and style. Madison was beautiful. Tall blonde hair cascading in waves to her shoulders, a striking smile. But along with her beauty, something else grew inside her. Something I couldn't control. Ingratitude. I'll never forget one moment in particular. A family dinner 2 years ago. She had just arrived with a group of college friends. They were loud, laughing, full of that energy only the young have. One of them asked, "Who pays for all these trips, Madison?" She laughed, raised her glass of wine, and said, "My personal sponsor." The whole table burst out laughing. I sat at the end of the table, feeling my face burn. I knew she was talking about me, and in that wave of laughter, I realized how I was seen, not as a father, not as a role model, but as a walking credit card. From then on, the signs just piled up. Impatient looks when I gave advice. Sighs when I asked about school. Short, mechanical answers. I'm fine, Dad. I know, Dad. Don't worry, Dad. But as quickly as she pulled away, she clung tighter to the credit card I gave her. A platinum card with my name on the bill, but one she used as if it were her own identity. It was her status symbol. Fancy restaurants, designer clothes, last-minute weekend trips. And me? I paid for it all in silence. Deep down, I kept believing it was just a phase, that one day she would finally see it. But that day never came. The distance between us wasn't measured in miles. It was made of indifference. I could sit right next to her and still feel invisible. Like that afternoon we went to a cafe downtown. She spent most of the time on her phone, typing furiously. I tried to start a conversation. Madison, have you thought about internships? I could help with some contacts. She looked up for half a second and replied flatly, Dad, relax. I'll figure it out. Then went right back to her phone. I sat there, holding a cup of cold coffee, pretending to read the paper. But inside, a voice screamed, You're not needed anymore. That was the reality. A father who poured himself out, little by little, to fill a daughter's life that had no space for gratitude. A house weighed down by memories only I seemed to carry. A life defined by sacrifice, but ignored by the one who should have honored it most. And in that setting, in that emotional abyss, the blocked message happened. It wasn't just a thoughtless gesture. It was the final symbol of our relationship at that moment. She cut the wires, and I was left in the dark. But what Madison didn't know, what she still hasn't realized, is that I also had a key. A simple, silent key that could change everything without me saying a single word. And that key was right there, inside my own wallet. They say real fathers aren't remembered for the gifts they buy, but for the sleepless nights they endure. And if that's true, then I should live in my daughter's memory as a hero. I was never a rich man, but I was a working man. Since I was 17, when I started as an intern in a small accounting office, I learned something. Numbers don't lie, people do. And in the end, when the bills are due, the weight doesn't fall on the world's shoulders, it falls on ours. My father died young, and my mother did the best she could. I grew up knowing nothing in life came for free. Maybe that's why, when Madison was born, I swore she would never know the same scarcity I did. She would never open the fridge and find only scraps. She would never wear the same pair of worn-out sneakers for 2 years. She would never taste the bitter shame of being the poor kid at school. And I kept my promise. I worked endless overtime hours. I rode crowded buses when I should have been home resting. I turned down parties, birthdays, trips. I traded leisure for bills paid on time. Every dollar that hit my account already had a destination, making sure Madison had whatever she wanted, and she did. Ballet at 7, English lessons at 8, a trip to Disney at 12, a brand new car for her 18th birthday, a private college with tuition that cut like a knife. I covered everything quietly, without complaint, because I thought one day she would see, but she never did. To Madison, it all seemed natural, as if it had always been that way, as if the effort behind it all was invisible. A clear example, her high school graduation. While she walked across the stage in a blue dress that cost me almost an entire month's salary, I sat in the back of the auditorium in a plain suit, wearing a tie I had borrowed from my brother-in-law. I remember one of her classmates saying, "Wow, Madison, that dress is stunning." And she answered, with that half-mocking laugh, "Oh, it was just a gift." A gift, as if it had fallen from the sky. No one there knew that, to pay for that dress, I had skipped the bar for 3 months, driven on bald tires, and put off replacing my scratched glasses. No one knew. And she didn't seem to care. Life kept moving in that same rhythm. I held everything together, while she soared, never looking back. Even in the simplest things, my effort was invisible. I remember one Saturday when her car wouldn't start. I was lying down, trying to recover from a brutal week, when the phone rang. "Dad, my car won't start. Fix it." I rushed out, went to her college parking lot, popped the hood, and saw it was just a dead battery. I rigged a quick jump from my car, and 10 minutes later she was ready to head to a party. Before leaving, she had the nerve to say, "Lucky for me you know about this stuff." I smiled. smiled. But inside, I knew it wasn't luck. It was effort. Effort she would never recognize. And the ingratitude didn't stop there. When she did well in college, she credited professors, friends, luck. Never the fact that someone was paying her tuition, her books, her top-of-the-line laptop. When she traveled with friends, she posted pictures smiling on beaches with captions like, "Life's achievements." But whose achievements? Life's? Or the man sitting in a cold office calculating how to pay the next bill? I had spent years being the foundation, the solid ground. But no one praises the ground. Everyone just looks at the building that rises above it. And little by little, I realized my competence was invisible, my sacrifices disposable, my dedication ignored, and the cruelest part, she didn't see me as an example. She saw me as a resource, and a TM with a last name. That night when she blocked me, all these memories hit me at once. Every hard-earned dollar, every swallowed tear, every sleepless night. And what I was left with was a cold silence and a single word on the screen. Blocked. But maybe that was the warning I needed, because in that moment I realized that one who had always been underestimated still held the strongest card, and soon she would find out. The block wasn't just a tap on a screen, it was an invisible slap. And like any slap, it left a mark. The next morning, still stunned, I tried to act as if nothing had happened. I made coffee, burned 2 pieces of toast, and sat at the table. But every time my phone buzzed with useless notifications, I looked, hoping it was her. It wasn't. It was a bank ad, a pharmacy text, never Madison. I gathered courage and tried to call again. The result, silence. Once again, blocked. This time, the humiliation came with a cruel detail. The automated voice of the phone operator, cold and mechanical, telling me the call could not be completed. It was like hearing a sentence. My daughter had condemned me to exile from her life. That same afternoon, I decided to drive to the university. I wanted to see her face to face, look her in the eyes, and ask why. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, a mistake, some reason I didn't know. But when I parked and saw Madison from a distance, hope shattered. She was surrounded by friends, wearing an expensive jacket, a designer purse, her phone shining in her hands, laughing loud like the world belonged to her. I walked up slowly, my heart racing. She turned. For a second, she looked surprised, but her face quickly hardened. "Dad, what are you doing here? I tried calling you. I thought something might have happened." She crossed, her arms clearly uncomfortable with her friends watching. "I blocked you because I'm sick of your nagging calls. It's always the same. Internships, responsibilities, money." Her words cut like knives. Right there, in the middle of the university plaza, she exposed me not as a father, but as a burden. One of her friends chuckled quietly. Another gave me that pitying look that hurts worse than hate. I felt my face burn. I took a deep breath, trying to hold my composure. "Madison, I just worry. Everything I've done was for..." "Exactly," she snapped, raising her voice. "Everything you've ever done was just pay bills. That's it. I don't need you controlling me too." In that instant, I realized there was no misunderstanding. She had done it on purpose. Blocking me on the phone was just an extension of something bigger, the emotional block that had been building for years. I stood frozen. The cold wind stung my face, but what really chilled me was being reduced to nothing in public. My fingers trembled. My throat was dry. I wanted to answer, to shout, to ask, "And what about all those nights I stayed awake, and all the times you came running to me for help?" But I said nothing, because I knew words would be useless. She turned her back, went on laughing with her friends as if I didn't exist, and I just stood there, watching. That was the moment something changed inside me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't hate. It was clarity. If my daughter saw me only as a card, then maybe it was time to remind her that even cards have limits. I walked back to my car in silence. The engine roared, but inside, I was quieter than ever. In the rearview mirror, I saw my hardened face. Every wrinkle was a map of the effort it took to get here. And for the first time in many years, I realized I still had the power to teach a lesson, not with speeches, not with lectures, but with a gesture as simple as hers. She blocked me with one click, and I already knew how to answer. with another click. After that day at the university, when Madison treated me like some unwanted inspector of her life, memories of other small injustices started coming back like painful echoes. It was as if every forgotten detail decided to reappear one after another, reminding me this hadn't happened overnight. Blocking me on her phone wasn't an accident. It was the peak of a staircase built step by step out of ingratitude. I remembered a dinner at home just a few months earlier. I had made my famous beef stroganoff, the dish she always begged for when she was a kid. I spent hours chopping the ingredients, stirring the sauce until it was perfect. I set the table carefully, folded napkins, lit candles to make it cozy. I wanted it to feel like a reunion. When Madison arrived, she dropped her purse on a chair, grabbed a plate, and without even tasting it, said, "Oh, Dad, this again? You should just order takeout like everybody else." I smiled without answering, but inside it felt like she had spit on the plate before sitting down. She ate 2 distracted bites, eyes glued to her phone, and then went upstairs saying she had stuff to take care of. I spent the rest of the night alone, eating in silence, watching the candle slowly die out. Another memory stuck with me. A Saturday morning, I was painting the garden fence. The sun was already burning, and my hands were covered in paint. Madison walked past the gate with 2 friends. They were all dressed up for some fancy brunch downtown. I was dirty with paint, but I waved and smiled. "Good morning, girls." They answered with a quick, rushed hi. But Madison made a point of adding, half joking, loud enough for me to hear, "That's my dad, always busy with little things." Her friends laughed. The word little things echoed in my head for days. To her, the work of keeping a home standing, of maintaining every detail, of being the silent foundation, it was nothing more than little things. There was also the time her card was declined at a clothing store because I had forgotten to pay the bill on time. She called me furious, her voice sharp, like I was some incompetent employee. "Dad, do you have any idea how humiliating that was? Everyone staring at me like I was some broke girl." I explained it was a mistake, that I'd fix it in minutes, but she hung up on me. That day, I spent hours at the computer dealing with the bank, while she later posted Instagram stories, smiling, showing off her shopping bags. After I fixed the payment, no apology, no thank you. These small wounds piled up like drops of water carving into stone, and little by little, I wore down. Every effort of mine felt invisible, every act of care dismissed. It was as if I was always one step behind, carrying the weight, while she strutted down life's red carpet, even on special days. I remember the last Father's Day. I woke up early, set the breakfast table, waiting for her to come downstairs. I made pancakes, squeezed fresh, orange juice, even bought a little cake. I waited until noon. The clock ticked slowly, the silence of the house deafening. Finally, my phone buzzed with a short message. "Happy Father's Day. I'm busy. Zoxo." I held the phone in my hands for long minutes. That cold, soulless phrase felt like a reminder that I had become nothing more than a background character in her life. I stared at the untouched cake on the table and wondered, will she ever realize? Each of these seems trivial to outsiders were bricks building a wall between us, a wall that had risen so high that, the day she blocked me, I finally understood. She had already been on the other side for a long time, and there was more. The neighbors had started to notice. In casual encounters, some would say, "Your daughter is always so well dressed. She must have a great internship somewhere." I smiled, but inside it cut deep, because the truth was different. There was no job, no paycheck. It was all me. I paid for every outfit, every dinner, every spontaneous trip, and no one knew. She didn't bother to tell them. To others, Madison looked like an independent young woman full of accomplishments. To me, she was just someone who never learned how to say thank you. These micro-injustices became silent proof that I was nothing more than a resource. A shadow that appeared only when her card swiped through the machine, and when it didn't go through, I was the target of her anger. At that point, it wasn't just pain anymore. It was clarity. Clarity that if I kept allowing it, she would never learn the value of anything. And maybe being blocked on her phone was a disguised gift, because it made me see that I also had a button And unlike her, I knew exactly when to press it. After so many signs, so many little wounds piling up like dust on forgotten furniture, I realized there was no point in speaking anymore. Words no longer carried any weight in my daughter's life. Every piece of advice was taken as criticism. Every act of care was twisted into control. Every sacrifice of mine was invisible. That's when silence became my greatest weapon. I didn't yell, didn't argue, didn't bang on her door demanding answers. I just sat in the living room chair, phone heavy in my hand, staring at the name on the screen, Madison, a name I chose when she was born, a name a single click had erased from my life. While the world slept, I stayed awake, thinking. Anger came and went in waves. But underneath it was something stronger, a cold, clear certainty. She had blocked me from her phone, but the card she used, the same card that paid for her fancy dinners, her designer clothes, her last-minute trips, was directly tied to me. And suddenly, that piece of plastic stopped being just a financial tool. It became a symbol of dependence, an invisible thread still connecting me to her life. The next morning, I sipped my coffee slowly. The newspaper lay open, but I didn't read. Single line. My eyes were fixed on the laptop screen. The cursor blinked in the bank's login bar, almost calling me. I typed in my username, my password, and there it was, the list of cards. Mine and hers. I hovered the cursor over the name Madison Walker, Platinum. My heart raced like I was about to commit a crime. And in a way, I was. Not a crime against the law, but against the logic of an entire life spent giving in, paying up, swallowing my pride in silence. My hand shook. I could simply click block card. A small, invisible gesture, as fast as the one she made when she erased me from her phone. But I didn't. Not yet. Because deep down, I knew this decision wasn't about revenge. It was about limits. It was about dignity. It was about showing, without a single word, that every choice comes with a consequence. I closed the laptop, walked out of the house. I wandered through the neighborhood as if I were running away from myself. The cold morning wind slapped my face. I passed the same garden fence I had painted months before, the same houses where neighbors smiled at me, unaware of the storm I carried inside. With every step, I asked myself, would she understand? Would she finally see what I could never make her see with words? I came back home and sat down again. Turned on the TV, but the sound was just a distant hum. All I could hear in my head was the echo of her words at the university. All you do is pay the bills. And I thought, well then, let me show you. What happens when I stop paying? I waited a few days. I watched her expenses through the banking app. Every purchase recorded. Luxury stores, overpriced coffee shops, ride shares that cost more than I spent on a whole week of bus fare. It was like watching a movie that I was producing, but without the script, without the credits, without even being acknowledged. Each notification was a cruel reminder. She didn't need me as a father. She needed me as her wallet. And that was the machine I was about to shut down. One night, as heavy rain hit the living room windows, I made my decision. I opened the app, clicked on her card. The black button glowed blue on the screen, like a doorway to something new. My hand hovered in the air. For a moment, I almost pulled back. I remembered her baby face, that toothless smile, the way she used to run into my arms calling Daddy. But then I remembered the laughter with her friends at my expense, the cold words, the looks of contempt, the word blocked, stamped across my phone screen, and finally, I clicked. The sound was almost imperceptible, just a short beep. Card successfully blocked. But to me, that beep was thunder. It was the sound of years of silence turning into action. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and leaned back in the chair. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just felt a strange relief, like someone dropping a weight they had carried for far too long. I knew the storm was coming. Madison would find out. And when it happened, I wouldn't need to say a word. The world would speak for me. The echo of that click was still inside me when the next day began. I knew it wouldn't take long for her to notice. And it didn't. Friday night, I got the first message. Not from her after all. I was still blocked on her phone. It was from the bank. Purchase attempt declined on additional card. For a moment, my heart raced. I almost regretted it. Almost. Saturday morning, another alert. Transaction not authorized. And another minutes later. Each notification was like the beat of war drums getting closer. I could picture the scene. And soon, I didn't need to. That same day, a friend called me. His voice carried curiosity mixed with mischief. "David, I was at that new restaurant downtown. The fancy one, you know? I saw your daughter there. She had a situation." The situation had a name declined card. And that's when I knew my silent decision had stopped being just a gesture between father and daughter. It was now public. That evening, Madison showed up at my house. She didn't knock, she pounded on the door. The sound echoed through the hallway. When I opened it, there she was, face flushed, eyes blazing, breath uneven. "Dad, what did you do?" I stood still for a second, looking at the young woman who seemed to have completely forgotten the little girl who once called me her hero. She was wearing an expensive dress, high heels, flawless makeup, but none of it hid the desperation spilling from her eyes. "What did I do?" I repeated slowly, trying to stay calm. "I just pressed a button." She barged in without asking, tossed her purse on the couch, and started pacing like a caged animal. You have no idea how humiliated I was. All my friends were there. The waiter brought the bill and the card just wouldn't work. He tried 3 times. 3. Everyone's staring at me. Do you know what that feels like? I took a deep breath. With every word she shouted, it was like years of invisibility were being thrown back in my face. But for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel shame. I felt steady. "Yes, I do," I answered. "I know exactly what it feels like to be embarrassed in front of others. I've lived through it many times, Madison. The difference is, you never noticed." She froze, looked at me with narrowed eyes, trying to process my words. You had no right to do this to me. I'm your daughter." Her words echoed in the room. "I'm your daughter." Yes, she was. But since when did being a daughter mean only rights and no responsibilities? Since when did being a daughter mean a free pass to treat a father like he was invisible? "Exactly because you're my daughter," I said, my voice calm but firm. "That's why I did it." The silence that followed was thick. She shook with anger, and for a moment I remembered the child who once cried when her bike broke, running to me saying, "Only you can fix it, Daddy." Now grown, she looked at me as if I were the enemy. She tried to argue again, but her voice cracked. Her hands trembled. Tears welled up, unable to hide the mix of rage and humiliation. You embarrassed me." "No, Madison." I stepped closer. "The one who embarrassed you was life. All I did was wipe off the makeup you were wearing." Her face went pale. She was speechless. And in that instant, I realized the public confrontation hadn't just happened at the restaurant. It was happening here, in my living room. There was no audience of friends or waiters watching, but there was something bigger, her conscience finally colliding with reality. Inside, I trembled. It wasn't easy to say those words. Each one felt like it tore a piece out of me. But at the same time, each one gave me back something I had lost, my dignity. That blocked card wasn't just a useless piece of plastic. It was a symbol of change. Proof that I too knew how to press buttons. Madison sat down on the couch, defeated, buried her face in her hands. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, looking at the woman I raised, the woman I provided for, the woman I loved, but who needed to finally learn that every privilege comes with a price. The silence in the room was heavy, but for the first time in years, it wasn't the silence of submission. It was the silence of someone who knew the balance had shifted, and I had no intention of going back. She was still sitting there, face in her hands, when I realized this was the moment. The air in the room felt heavier. The street lights outside cast weak beams through half-closed curtains, projecting shadows across the walls. The ticking clock sounded too loud, as if even time was waiting for my response. Madison lifted her eyes, red, watery, but still full of pride. She tried to straighten herself, brushing her blonde hair back from her face, but her voice came out shaky. "You don't understand, Dad. You exposed me." I went through the most humiliating moment of my life. I gripped the back of the armchair as if holding on to keep myself from falling. The sight of her, curled up in front of me, felt surreal. For years, I saw her as the little girl I needed to protect from everything. Now, she was the woman who had to face the reflection of her own choices. I took a few steps until I stood right in front of her. The distance between us wasn't far, but it felt like an abyss. Shame? I repeated quietly. You talk about shame as if it were something new to you. She frowned, confused. I know very well what shame feels like, Madison. My voice was steady now, each word hitting like a hammer. I felt it countless times. When you laughed at me in front of your friends. When you introduced me as your personal sponsor. When you left me talking to myself at the breakfast table. She blinked slowly, as if every memory was a blade cutting through her skin. And then, without raising my voice, I let out the sentence that had been stuck in my throat ever since the word "blocked" appeared on my phone. You blocked me on your phone, Madison. I just returned the favor on your card. The silence that followed was absolute. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her eyes widened, her breath caught. It was as if that sentence had split the air in two, before and after. Suddenly, I felt a strange relief run through me. It wasn't happiness, nor revenge. It was the feeling of finally putting a period at the end of a story that, for years, seemed written only by her hand. She tried to stammer something, but her voice broke. You couldn't have, yes, I could. I cut in. And I had to, because sometimes, Madison, life only teaches when someone has the courage to turn off the faucet. Her shoulders dropped. The pride that had always kept her standing tall seemed to melt away. She lowered her eyes, staring at the living room floor as if searching for an explanation she couldn't find. I watched her in silence. Every tremor in her body was proof that the message had landed not in her ears, but in her soul. I remembered the countless times I dreamed of an apology, a gesture of gratitude, a simple "thanks, Dad." Maybe that day would never come. Maybe blocking the card wouldn't bring instant regret. But one thing was certain. She would never again see me as her personal sponsor. And in that moment, without an audience, without witnesses, I realized that this was the true climax. Not at the restaurant, not in front of her friends, but here, in this modest living room, lit only by a dim lamp and the shadows of the night. The sentence had been short, simple, but final. You blocked me on your phone. I just returned the favor on your card. That was the verdict, and there was no going back. She sat frozen for long seconds, and for the first time in years, she didn't argue. She didn't shout, didn't mock. She just stayed silent, and I understood. Sometimes someone else's silence is the greatest proof that you've won. I walked away slowly, went to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. My hand still trembled. The sound of water hitting the glass felt like a cleansing, washing away years of humiliation. When I came back, Madison was still sitting there, her face buried in her hands, shoulders slumped, her breathing uneven. She was no longer the proud young woman looking down at me. She was just a daughter disarmed for the first time. And I was finally more than just a credit card. After that night, the silence lingered, not just in the house, but in her life as well. In the days that followed, the signs appeared. Notifications of declined purchases stacked up on my banking app. Small amounts at first, overpriced coffee, ride shares. Then bigger ones, a luxury clothing store, a hotel, all denied. Little by little, the bubble burst. And soon, the shame wasn't just hers anymore. Friends whispered behind her back. College classmates gossiped in the hallways. I didn't need to be there to know the news. Spread quickly. Madison, the girl who always looked flawless, had faced public humiliation because her card no longer worked. Even some neighbors looked at me differently. They didn't say anything, but I could feel it in the air. Some with curiosity, others with respect. Maybe, for the first time, I wasn't just the sponsor. I was a man who had finally said enough. Madison tried to resist. She spent days without speaking to me, trapped in her pride. But every declined transaction, every judgmental look she got, was a lesson I could never have taught with words. It was life sending her the bill. Until one afternoon, she showed up at my door again. Not like before, when she arrived furious. This time, she looked worn out. Her face tired, dark circles under her eyes, her step slow. No makeup, no designer clothes, just her. "Dad," her voice cracked. I don't know what to do. I stayed silent. Not because I had no answer, but because for once, She was the one who needed to speak, and she did. She spoke about the shame, about her pride finally breaking, about the friends who disappeared once they realized the shine wasn't hers, it was the money I'd been pouring behind her. She spoke about the emptiness of realizing she had never built anything on her own. As she broke down, I just listened. For the first time in years, she was the one pouring out words, and I was the one receiving. When she was done, I handed her an envelope. Inside was a single printed sheet, a detailed statement of all the years of expenses, every tuition payment, every trip, every dress, every night out paid for. She looked at the numbers, and I saw her face go pale. All of this was you? It was, I answered firmly, and I don't regret what I did, but now it's your turn. She didn't reply. She just closed the envelope and lowered her head. In that moment, I realized accountability wasn't just about money. It was about life, about learning that choices have consequences, that respect doesn't come from the silence of the one who pays, but from the awareness of the one who recognizes. And in her broken gaze, I understood. The lesson had finally begun. A few weeks passed since that night I blocked Madison's card, and in that time, something started to change. She didn't become a different person overnight. Pride doesn't vanish like a deleted text message, but for the first time, I saw something different in her. An effort, small but real. She got an internship at a marketing agency. It wasn't glamorous, and it didn't pay much, but it was hers. It was the first money that hit her account without depending on my sweat. When she came to tell me, I noticed her eyes carried a different kind of light. Not the artificial glow of store windows, but the quiet spark of someone taking their first step alone. She still came to my house, sometimes in silence, sometimes starting conversations she never would have before. She no longer arrived in heels with a designer bag. She came in worn sneakers and simple clothes, but there was something new in that. Authenticity. I changed too. I learned to let go of the need to carry the world on my shoulders for her. I understood that love isn't blind support, it's teaching someone how to stand on their own. Blocking the card wasn't the end of our relationship. It was the beginning of a new one. One afternoon, we were sitting on the porch. She held a cup of coffee, stared out at the garden, and whispered, "Dad, I never really stopped to think about everything you did for me. I guess I was blind. I didn't answer right away. Silence is also an answer." Then I simply placed my hand over hers and said, "The greatest gift a father can give isn't a card with no limit, Madison. It's the limit that teaches the value of things." She didn't cry, but I saw the way she swallowed hard, the way she turned her eyes toward the horizon. And in that small, restrained gesture, there was something I had waited years for: recognition. Today, looking back, I see that the cold word on my phone screen, blocked, wasn't the end. It was the beginning of my turning point. I discovered that dignity is not begged for, it's claimed. And that sometimes the quietest gesture is the one that screams the loudest. And if you've stayed with me until now, I want to ask you something. Comment below if anyone has ever tried to treat you like you were disposable. I want to hear your voice. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because every time we share stories like this, we prove together that a parent's love isn't an unlimited card. It's a limit that teaches love and respect. Because in the end, what remains isn't what we give, it's what we teach.